Welcome everyone to episode 5 of Wrestling Home Media Reviews. In today's video we will be heading into WCW territory, and our focus is going to be on WCW's greatest pay-per-view matches. This was a DVD and Blu-ray released by the WWE in 2014 that looks back at matches from World Championship Wrestling pay-per-views that they felt were the greatest matches ever. I got given this by a family member even though I didn't have it on my wish list. So I ended up watching this and, yeah, granted, the matches, though not all of them mind you, I felt were great, or at least fine. And after going through my collection of wrestling that I have on DVD or Blu-ray to decide what should be looked at for this episode, I went with this feature. It was either this or the top 25 rivalries in wrestling history. I of course went with the WCW option, but the top 25 rivalries feature I will review in a future episode. As with all previous episodes so far, I will be going over each match in this set and give my rating for the individual bout. I will also of course include the matches that were extra exclusives on the Blu-ray release. The words I will use for the scoring system will be great, decent and mediocre, and this time around the table you see will help in keeping us with the scores as we go along the list of matches that are featured in this set. And also, just a quick side note, on the front cover it says Volume 1, and I assume that WWE were planning to release a second volume after this, but they never did. No, I don't know. But anyway, enough of all that. Let's get this show on the road and begin with our look. Our host for this set is Booker T, and he gives us an intro and a brief talk about WCW's pay-per-views and some of its stars. Then he talks about the matches being all classics on this feature. Well, that's where I come in on that statement. He then begins talking about WCW's answer to WrestleMania, Starrcade, and then Booker briefly tells us about the upcoming first match on this feature, and we then cut to the first match on this set. Firstly, we have the Ric Flair vs Ronnie Garvin Steel Cage match from Starrcade 1987. Flair was challenging NWA World Champion Ronnie Garvin for the title, and the two put on a fairly good bout inside the cage. Early back and forth moves between the two before Flair ended up dominating the majority of the first half of the match. Garvin was then able to turn the table shortly after the 10-minute mark, and Flair got busted open about 2/3 into the bout. Towards the end, there were some good counter-pin attempts, and Flair ended up winning the match after reversing an Irish whip and sending Garvin's head into the cage to become the NWA World Champion for a 5th time. The match itself I thought had a bit of a slow-paced feel, but I still found it to be a good match. But my score is only going to be decent, but the match itself I thought was fine on the whole. Next, we have the NWA US title match between champion Barry Windham and the American Dream Dusty Rhodes from the 1988 Great American Bash. I actually found this match to be enjoyable, to be honest. There was some good heel work by Windham as the fans rallied behind the American Dream, and the match came to an end when Ronnie Garvin, who had competed in the Tower of Doom match a little earlier in the show, showed up, and it was thought that he was there to help Dusty, but instead he sucker punched Rhodes and turned heel. And the punch from Garvin helped Windham to retain the US title. As I said, I had a good time watching this match, and I thought the Ronnie Garvin heel turn made the match more superb, so I'm going to go with great as the rating for this one. We now move on to Sting and Dusty Rhodes taking on the Road Warriors at Starrcade 1988. Now, lots of double teaming from Animal and Hulk in this bout. Great work by Sting as he worked the first few minutes by himself before tagging in Dusty Rhodes, who came in with his signature elbows that Rhodes himself can pull off with the audience behind him. The match ended in a DQ win for Sting and Dusty due to the Road Warriors manager Paul Ellering pulling the referee aside to break up a pin attempt after Sting hit a diamond crossbody on Animal. My rating will be decent as there was some good work put into the match, but the DQ finish doesn't put this one high on the list. We now have Ric Flair against Ricky Steamboat for the NWA World title at Chi-Town Rumble 1989. Couldn't wait to see this one as the Nature Boy and the Dragon can easily work wonders in the ring. This was a great back and forth encounter with lots of fast paced manoeuvres by Steamboat and some typical yet cool underhanded tactics by Flair himself. The pacing was on point for this 23-minute match, and I did get hooked in a lot throughout the whole thing. Steamboat would win the match with an inside cradle after reversing the figure 4 leg lock and became the new NWA champion as Flair appeared distraught. The chemistry these two had to deliver a classic is just phenomenal. So of course this deserves to be rated as great, but I will say it's an all-time great. Check this one out if you haven't already. We're now at the US title match between champion Lex Luger and Brian Pillman from Halloween Havoc 1989. This match features some impressive fast-paced work from Pillman himself, but the match does have quite a few rest holds that does make things feel slightly dull. Lex Luger, I noticed, lacked facial expressions whenever Brian Pillman had him in a submission hold, whereas Pillman's selling I felt was more fine. Luger retained the title after reversing a crossbody into a stun gun off the ropes, scoring the pinfall win. Now, usually I consider Lex Luger to be a guy who can be a little hit or miss when it comes to his matches. For this bout, yeah, I believe that Luger and Pillman did work well, but I only feel the match as a whole was at least decent, so that would be my overall decision. Next is another NWA World title match between Ric Flair, the champion, and the man called Sting from the 1990 Great American Bash. Boy, if these two had countless encounters in the ring or what. In this match, Ole Anderson had to be handcuffed to Elegante to prevent him from interfering on the Nature Boy's behalf, whilst a lot of babyfaces such as the Junkyard Dog and the Steiner brothers surrounded the ring. Now, lots of quick encounters by both men during the bout, but the best part of the match for me was when Flair Irish whipped Sting into the barricade on the outside and Sting no-sold the impact. At one point, Sting had Flair in the Scorpion Deathlock when the rest of the four horsemen came down the ramp and would end up brawling with the babyfaces who were at ringside. Shortly afterwards, Flair tried to pin Sting with his feet on the ropes but got pushed off by Scott Steiner, and finally Sting won the match and the NWA title following a roll-up. It was a fun match, and I liked the brawl between the babyfaces and the horsemen, along with Sting no-selling the barricade spot, as mentioned before. It's going to be another great point for Great, but I suppose there are better matches between the Icon and the Nature Boy out there, in my opinion. We now have the steel cage match between Lex Luger and Barry Windham for the vacant WCW World title. Ric Flair had left WCW due to backstage problems with Executive Vice President Jim Herd, and the world title had been vacated. In the match, both Windham and Luger start and stop quite a bit during the entire contest, whilst fans chanted "We want Flair," which indicated that they weren't getting into the match. And there was little noise from the fans in attendance too, I noticed. I already said that I feel Luger can be hit or miss in his matches, whereas Windham, I feel, was the better worker out of the two in this match. Following distractions from Harley Race and Mr. Hughes, who came down the ringside, Lex Luger won the match, and the total package became the new WCW champion. Despite the light stalling that I talked about regarding this match, I don't consider this one to be completely mediocre, so I'm going to go with decent again, although it's a bit of a reluctant rating, mind you. We come next to Jushin Thunder Liger against Brian Pillman for the WCW Light Heavyweight title at Super Brawl 2. The early part of the match saw the two trading the advantage in the ring while picking up the pace with some aerial offense here and there before resuming submission holds again. We got some impressive dives to the outside which made the match more fun to watch as always. In the end we see Pillman rolling up Liger for the win and he became the new light heavyweight champion. It's been quite a few matches in this feature so far that have ended via a roll up pinfall. This match was indeed a great one to watch, so it's going to be another point for great. We are now at Wrestle War 92 with the War Games match between Sting Squadron and the Dangerous Alliance. Lots of fans have called this the greatest War Games match from the WCW days, and I agree, it's one of my all-time favourites as well. This match is just flat out awesome, and you need to see it for yourself if you haven't yet, as there's so much that happens in this one that makes it a classic. It does have the feel of an all-out war inside the double-ringed cage. Quite a bit of blood in this bout, and with legendary names in this match such as Steve Austin, Sting, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Ravishing Rick Rude and Arn Anderson, you know what you're in for when watching this. When it came to the match beyond period, the war ended when Larry Sabisco accidentally hit his teammate Bobby Eaton in his shoulder with the metal rod of the top turnbuckle, and it led to Sting locking in an armbar to win the match for his squadron. I would love to talk more about this match, but I would end up spending the rest of your day going over it again and again. This War Games gets the guaranteed great rating along with 2 thumbs up and a 5-star rating, all of which it no doubt deserves. Our next bout is the Cactus Jack vs Vader Texas Death Match from Halloween Havoc 1993. The two started the bout brawling on the outside for the first couple of minutes. We get a portion of chair shots in the bout, though a couple of them looked a little weak in my opinion. Cactus Jack managed to get a couple of pinfalls, but Vader managed to make it to his feet before the 10 count. And the bout ended when Harley Race tasered Jack on his leg following a pinfall from Vader, and thus he wasn't able to get up before the 10 count, which led to Vader scoring the win. And following the bout, Cactus DDT'd Harley Race as revenge. This was a good match, and I'm going with great again, though this encounter between the two I feel probably wasn't their best, but it is still fun to see. We now come to Bash at the Beach 1994 for the United States title match between Stunning Steve Austin and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Austin attacked Steamboat early on in the bout until the Dragon quickly retaliated. Lots of early back and forth action between the two, and Austin used some underhanded tactics such as the spot where he claimed to injure his knee, but Steamboat wasn't buying it. And towards the end of the bout, Austin pushed the referee aside when the Dragon came off the top rope, and the referee attempted to disqualify Austin, but Steamboat pleaded with him not to do so. And after Austin reversed a running crossbody into an inside cradle, Steamboat managed to kick out, but Austin rolled him up again, and this time he used his feet on the ropes for leverage to get the win. This was a good showing where the veteran puts over the rising star, though WCW dropped the ball with Steve Austin unfortunately. So it's another great match that's been looked at. And as a quick side note, this was Ricky Steamboat's final match on a pay-per-view until WrestleMania 25 in 2009, where he lost a handicap match to Chris Jericho. We now come to Halloween Havoc 1994 for Hulk Hogan vs Ric Flair in a steel cage match for the WCW title, and Mr. T is a special guest referee. This match had the loser had to retire stipulation in the bout as well. To be fair, these two legends I felt did put on quite a good showing, even though this match has been badly reviewed. We get pretty standard Hogan manoeuvres with Flair working over Hogan until the usual comebacks came into play. And most of the bout felt like the two were going back and forth quite a bit, and Hogan does get into arguments quite a bit with Mr. T on occasion. We do get quite a bit of goings on the outside of the cage with Sensational Sherry and the Mouth of the South Jimmy Hart. And Sherry, despite getting held back by Hart and the man called Sting, managed to climb into the ring and assist Ric Flair. While others say the interference makes the match more chaotic, I actually enjoyed the interference from Sherry, and she does take a few bumps from Hogan. Hogan of course won the match following his signature leg drop, and thus the Nature Boy had to retire. Of course, retirements in wrestling never last too long, do they? Now, I'm sorry to those who do despise this match, but I actually enjoyed it, so I am going with great, but I do proudly admit that their match at Bash at the Beach 1994 was much better. Well, here we are, Bash at the Beach 1996 for the Outsiders and the Mystery Third Man against Sting, Macho Man Randy Savage and Lex Luger. Very early into the bout, Luger was removed from the match following an apparent injury, and the rest of the bout was more of a regular tag team match. We get lots of double teaming from the Outsiders, who I felt dominated the majority of the match, and everyone knows this bout because of the well-known ending, of course. Hulk Hogan comes out and everyone believes he's there to defend the honour of WCW. But no. Probably the greatest heel turn ever took place, and the rest we all know by now. The ending of this match was fantastic, but regarding the in-ring action prior to Hogan's appearance, I don't think this one was a great match, and it's definitely not mediocre material, mind you. So despite the fantastic ending, I'm only rating this one as decent, and that's as honest as I can be with the decision. Next is Diamond Dallas Page and Macho Man Randy Savage's no DQ match from Spring Stampede 1997. Savage tries to evade DDP early on before blindsiding him, but Page countered. We get lots of brawling on the outside and into the crowd, and we see weapons used, of course, though the referee does keep taking them away from the competitors even though it's a no disqualification match. And the poor referee gets absolutely battered by the Macho Man and even gets a pile driver for his troubles. In the end, Nick Patrick comes to officiate the end of the bout, and DDP pulls off the Diamond Cutter the way the man can do it excellently, and Patrick ended up counting the pinfall win. After the bout, other New World Order members came down, and Eric Bischoff especially wasn't pleased. Well, why wouldn't he be? And then Nick Patrick received a jackknife from Kevin Nash as punishment for letting DDP get the win. Diamond Dallas Page versus Randy Savage is easily one of the best rivalries during the first year of the New World Order, bar none. And all their pay-per-view matches range from fun to outstanding, so this match I can consider a great pay-per-view bout from WCW. Oh boy, time for a phenomenal classic, Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero, Halloween Havoc 1997. A match that put the main eventers to shame on this particular night. In this bout for the Cruiserweight title, had Mysterio lost, he had to unmask. And this match got tons of praise from the commentators, and rightly so. And this is a good example of showing that it's not always about the main event. The mid-card has a tendency to steal the show, and this is a perfect Hurricanrana roll-up as the fans cheered in delight. Following the match, Guerrero blindsided Rey and then tossed him out of the ring in frustration. Like the last match we looked at, we have another one of WCW's greatest pay-per-view matches to be included in this feature, and it definitely had to be included here. Slamboree 1998, Bret Hart vs Randy Savage is next. We've got Rowdy Roddy Piper as the guest referee for this one. The Hitman stayed outside for the first few moments of the bout until Piper went and dragged him into the ring to begin. The early portion of the match felt like the two men were just going through the motions and not really bothered to put on a bout that could be at least pleasing. We see the two fight it out on the outside a bit, and then it goes into the crowd for a short period of time before returning to the ring. Bret Hart mainly went after the Macho Man's leg in this one, and when Miss Elizabeth came to distract Piper, Bret low-blowed Savage and attacked Piper from behind, and then Hollywood Hulk Hogan showed up to do more damage to the Macho Man's leg. This led to Bret locking in the sharpshooter to get the win, but the next night on Nitro, Piper reversed his decision and declared Savage the winner by DQ due to Bret blindsiding him from behind near the end of the bout. While this match does sound like a dream match of sorts, I feel it is sort of a letdown, but I give this one a pass and say that it was somewhat decent, but the two men, though a bit past their prime, could have delivered better in the ring, in my opinion. Next to come is Juventud Guerrera vs Chris Jericho from Road Wild 1998. Dean Malenko, who Jericho had been feuding with at the time, was the guest referee in this bout. This match was cited as the match of the night at this event, and I agree, it was the best performance put on here compared to all the rest that took place here. Malenko didn't get too involved in the bout, but he did it on occasion and called it down the middle. We got lots of good high-fly manoeuvres, of course, included here, and Jericho being excellent heel made this match a whole lot of fun. And I loved how the match ended where Guerrera, with assistance from Malenko, dived up and hit a diving hurricanrana on Y2J to score the win, and afterwards Jericho tried to hit Malenko, but Dean instead did the honours. This was another great showing from the Cruiserweight division, and another example of the mid-card stealing the show. Goldberg vs Diamond Dallas Page for the WCW title at Halloween Havoc 1998 is next. This main event has become fondly remembered as this is considered one of the best Goldberg matches in WCW ever, and also it was the first pay-per-view main event since the 1996 Great American Bash that had no association with the New World Order, so fans got a real treat here. Unfortunately, this match is also famous for not being shown live on pay-per-view due to the event going over time, something WCW got a lot of heat for. This match went for 10.5 minutes long, and it truly is somehow surprisingly must-see. Goldberg, of course, retained the world title, and he and DDP respectfully celebrated afterwards, mainly because I feel that the two were pleased with the outcome of the entire layout of the match, and I was as well. This bout is deserving to be called the greatest pay-per-view match of WCW. We now come to Bash at the Beach 2000 for a world title match between Booker T and champion Jeff Jarrett. The one thing everyone speaks about of this event is the Hulk Hogan-Vince Russo controversy that occurred prior to this match. While both the two men had competed earlier in the event, Jarrett, well, sort of, they put on a bout that would be felt as somewhat pleasing, given that this was in the year 2000, and we all know how WCW was struggling back then. In this bout, both men went into the crowd for a little bit, and back at the ring, Jarrett began to use weapons, even though this wasn't a no DQ match. After Jarrett kicked out a far bit too many times, he tried to hit Booker with his guitar off the top rope, but Booker hit the bookend to become the new WCW champion. This match isn't too bad on the whole, but it isn't a greatest pay-per-view match. Decent is what I'm going to call this match. Starrcade 2000 is next, and we've got a three-teamed ladder match in which the member of the winning team who grabbed the contract hanging above would challenge Chavo Guerrero for the Cruiserweight title. No idea why tag teams would be competing for a prize that is only for one person. Anyhow, the teams are 3 Count, Gregory Helms and Shannon Moore, Jamie Noble and Evan Courageous, and the Young Dragons are in this bout. When the Ladders took centre stage, we got some good moves and spots from all teams, along with some insane dives to the outside and some moments with the Ladders set up like a scaffold. 3 Count won this match after both Helms and Moore agreed to both grab the contract, and thus the pair would get the title shot instead of just one of them. Although the one-person only prize is somehow confusing, it doesn't take away the great things this match did offer, and as ladder matches were not in common in WCW in contrast to WWE, this one is great, but there is one ladder match in WCW in particular that was better for me. Scott Steiner against Diamond Dallas Page for the WCW title at the Greed pay-per-view in 2001 we now look at. This match was a Falls Count Anywhere match that Steiner, in my opinion, dominated a bit far too much in this one, as DDP's comebacks were shortly halted, but Page did get a good amount of offense on Steiner. We get fair amounts of weapons used in this bout, of course, and the bout ended when Rick Steiner interfered, and following this, Steiner ambushed Page with a baseball bat and knocked in the Steiner recliner, and Page was unable to continue, so Big Papa Pump retained the title. For WCW's final outing on pay-per-view, despite Steiner's over-dominance over DDP, this was pleasing enough to have me rate it as great, but honestly, it's only just enough to make me say it was great. We now come to the matches included as Blu-ray exclusives. Our first bout is Halloween Havoc 1989 for the Thunderdome match between Ric Flair and Sting against Terry Funk and the Great Muta. Bruno Sammartino was a guest referee for this one, and the match was slightly delayed due to a small fire that took place on the cage, and it ended up with the Great Muda spraying grey mist to douse it. The match had to end when either Gary Hart for Funk and Muda or Ole Anderson, Ric Flair and Sting threw in the towel. I actually had a good time watching this bout, and there was some good teamwork between the Stinger and the Nature Boy. Terry Funk fell victim to the cage quite a lot in this one, and there was some good moments involving a rope at the top of the cage. The best spot was seeing Sting dive off the top of the cage, and the match came to an end when Flair had Funk in a figure four and Sting hit several diving splashes simultaneously. Gary Hart entered the ring, and when Ole Anderson hit him, Hart's towel flew towards Sammartino, and Bruno declared Sting and Flair the winners. As mentioned, I found this match really good, so great is going to be my decision for this first exclusive. Next we have Alex Wright versus Jean-Paul Levesque, yes, Triple H, at Starrcade 1994. Honestly, I feel this match is on this feature because 1, it was to show that the King of Kings had worked in WCW, and 2, this was his only pay-per-view appearance in WCW. The bout did start and stop quite a little in the early part of the match, and we did get quite a lot of rest holds as too. Following an impressive handstand counter by Levesque, the pacing picked up more and Triple H got more aggressive and he did appear to dominate more of the match. However, this one ended when Das Wunderkind leaped over Levesque and rolled him up for the win. This match was at a time when both Alex Wright and Triple H were trying to find their feet in the ring, mind you. And the match on the whole was fine and of course decent, but it isn't what you would call a greatest pay-per-view match in my opinion. We come to Road Wild 1999 for Randy Savage against Dennis Rodman. Very strange choice for a bout called the greatest pay-per-view match if you ask me. The way this one goes was pretty odd. This was a singles match, yet we got to see the Macho Man hit Rodman with a camera, and my god, this match must have the record for most referees knocked down in one bout. First, Dennis Rodman attacked a referee following a 2 count, and then the next 2 who came down felt the wrath of the Macho Man. The bout went to the outside for a little bit, and we saw Savage lock Dennis Rodman in a porta potty and then tipping it over. Once the match got back in the ring, Rodman dived off the top rope and another referee bite the dust. Gordon Bennett. In the end, we saw Gorgeous George come down to hand Savage a chain. Then she low-blowed Rodman and Savage hit him with the chain he was given to score the win. There is no way on earth this is a greatest pay-per-view match, and it is not enough to say it's decent either. So we finally have a point for mediocre. Honestly, if they wanted one of Dennis Rodman's matches, they should have had his tag team match at Bash at the Beach 1997. We end the Blu-ray exclusives with Hulk Hogan vs Billy Kidman from Slamboree 2000. Eric Bischoff served as a guest referee in this one, and the match started off as a bit of a brawl that went in and out of the ring in quick succession. During the bout, Eric Bischoff kept trying to make things difficult for the Hulkster several times, and it led to Hogan eventually ambushing Eazy-E and then receiving a chair shot to the back. From this point on, we got lots of chair shots, and fans in attendance were actually into this bout, mind you. And along with the chair shots, Kidman missed a diving splash to Hogan, who moved off the table he was lying on, and Kidman went through it instead. Hogan also powerbombed Eric Bischoff through a table as well, and the match came to an end when Hogan pinned Kidman, and Hulk Hogan's nephew, Horace Hogan, grabbed Eric's hand to make the 3 count. Now, all things considered, this match was surprisingly fine, but my final say is that it was just decent. It just isn't good enough for me to say that it was a greatest pay-per-view match, but it was fun though, don't get me wrong. And that's that. We are at the end of the matches looked at. So now we look at the scoring system's outcome, and it showed that 15 of the matches featured were to me greatest, 9 of them were decent, and only the Savage Rodman bout from Road Wild 1999 was mediocre. That would make me say that WWE made some good choices when selecting pay-per-view matches from WCW that were great. Now it's time for my personal analysis. Well, firstly, there are some matches that were omitted from this feature that should have been in this, but I'll go over those in a moment. The matches that were the perfect selections for this feature, they would have to be Ric Flair vs Ricky Steamboat from Chi-Town Rumble 1989, Sting's Squadron vs The Dangerous Alliance War Games match from Wrestle War 1992, definitely Rey Mysterio vs Eddie Guerrero from Halloween Havoc 1997, Goldberg vs Diamond Dallas Page from Halloween Havoc 1998 is also good, and even the 3-way ladder match from Starrcade 2000 was one I also enjoyed. As for choices of matches that should have been added to this feature, I would go with the New World Order vs Team WCW War Games match from Brawl 1996, Eddie Guerrero versus Six in a ladder match from NWO Sold Out 1997. Hulk Hogan and Dennis Rodman versus Lex Luger and the Giant from Bash at the Beach 1997. I mentioned that earlier. Randy Savage versus Diamond Dallas Page in a Falls Count Anywhere match from the 1997 Great American Bash. And Ric Flair versus Vader from Starrcade 1993. Those are my personal choices for matches that should have been in this feature. Finally, my overall thoughts on this feature. Well, although I was entertained with this feature, it's not one I can say is a favourite, but it definitely is good to look at. Don't get me wrong. It was good, and out of 10, I'm going to go with 7. Booker T, yeah, I think he was a great choice as host for the feature. I will come back to more WCW related home media from WWE in the future. All there is left for me to say is thank you so much for watching this episode, and please join me again for next time on Wrestling Home Media Reviews. See you soon, and take care.